This is the most delicious fragrance I've made all week, and despite being a little bit more of an advanced soap making technique, it's really pretty simple. Now before we get started, I'm going to slip some sugar into my cold distilled water, get that dissolved down, and then I'm going to start with my lye water solution. Once I get this dissolved, I'll set this over to the side to cool, and then we'll break out the main project. And on this cold, snowy winter day, I'm going to cook a hot process soap that makes my entire kitchen smell like the Cheesecake Factory. In this episode of Thermal Mermaid, we're making pumpkin spice, goat's milk, and white clay. This bar is pure luxury. You'll see a lot of heavy conditioning hard oils being piled into my crock pot. Now this bar is made to be rich and moisturizing, but it scores pretty low on the bubbles and lather. That's why you saw me sneak that sugar into the lye water solution at the very beginning. Did you catch it? If not, go back and peek at that again. Dissolving sugar into the water before you add the lye will give you a boost in the big sudsy bubbles and balance out those creamy milk and clay bars. Now if you're watching this and you're one of those soapers who's joined me over at Thermal Mermaid, let me quickly show you where you can print the recipe and instructions for this project so you don't get lost looking for it. Inside your dashboard, scroll down to the recipe directory and click on Hot Process. You can find it listed under pumpkin spice, goat's milk, and white kaolin clay. It's in alphabetical order, so once you click on that, you'll get the full tutorial and the printable materials that go along with this. I want to give this just a few minutes to melt down, and when I come back, we'll be ready to get the soap batter mixed together. As soon as the oils are melted, we're ready to add the lye solution. The only coordination happening here is that I want to add these when they're within 15 degrees from each other. I don't want to shock the molecules with different temperatures. This happens really fast. The lye water is already hot, and the oils are only getting hotter, so this will cross temperatures within just a minute. I'm going to blend this all in with my stick blender. You can even blend this for just a few minutes. We're going to go right past emulsification and even bring it to a light trace. Nothing happens here until we start cooking, so you can just really take your time with this and make sure that your lye water solution and your oils are incorporated really well. Now in my imagination, I always thought that when my youngest turned about 20, that this would allow for them to go off and do their own adventures, and it would give me a life of no interruptions. It didn't turn out that way for me though. And right in the middle of this project, I am getting a very persistent request that can't wait. Everything has to stop and we have to change directions for just a second. Welcome to Every Street, Waterbury, Connecticut. Peaches couldn't wait for her scheduled walk. She was going to be relentless until I stopped to take her out, so we had to take a break to do this. Do you really want to go this far? It's kind of cold out here. It used to be you could let a dog zip out and come back in on their own. Rural Connecticut is a pretty safe place to walk around. But in the last 5 years, I've seen a bear that was larger than me and a bobcat walking through the neighbor's backyard. Now I live inside the city limits, and I'm actually standing on this street, which is a ledge overlooking the city that's behind me. And it's snowing right now, so it just looks like a bunch of white clouds. You wouldn't be able to see it in the camera. But even in the city, in this patch of trees right to my right, I've seen coyote, fox, and deer. And now one of the neighbors is saying that we have a fisher cat. Now I don't know if you've ever seen one of those demons, but you'll have to Google it and get a picture of it if you want to get an idea. Don't pull me, dog. I'm not wearing skis. But in all the years I was growing up, I thought fisher cats were these make-believe creatures, and now I find out that they're actually real. They're these vicious things that come out of the woods at night screaming like an Irish banshee, and they look for little dogs to eat. So Peaches doesn't get to leave the house without a leash and a buddy system, despite the fact that she does listen very well. But that's just to protect her. Now remind me to tell you later on about the Bigfoot that lives over on Southington Mountain, but that's going to have to be for later because we've left the soap unattended. Now I've let this cook down for about 20 minutes and I returned just in time. The soap has reached the top of the crock pot. This is almost entirely air being released, and I can just stir this back down. Today we've gone past the first phase of hot process and we're already going into the second phase on the very first check, so this batch is going to move quickly. This looks really well, but I just want to make sure that the soap is cooking evenly through the entire pot. So once I'm satisfied with what I'm looking at, we're going to put the cover back on this, and then we'll come back in another 20 minutes and check on it again. When I come back in about a half an hour, we're already moving nicely through the end of the second phase. Now, this isn't even through the pot, so I'll mix it up again. Remember, we still have 2.4 ounces of shea butter to add to this recipe. I've built in a 5% super fat into the recipe, and as everything is being saponified, we can add the shea butter in after the other oils have been eaten by the lye. This will ensure that our most expensive moisturizing oil will remain as the super fat. So we'll mix the shea butter during the second phase, and it'll melt right in on contact. Once we're done with this, I'll mix it in quite well, and then we'll put the lid on top and come back in a little bit and look for the final stage. Now, there really are tons of ways to make hot process and cold process soap, hence why it's called artisan soap, because you really do get to be creative with it. By the way, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because this is not the only soap making method and you don't want to miss the next one we have waiting for you. It only took another 30 minutes to get a full gel with this soap, so our total cook time was only an hour and a half. Take a look at how glassy this looks all the way through. This is what the Vaseline stage looks like, and I'm going to remove the heat from this soap right now. If I keep cooking it, I'm going to lose too much water and it'll start to dry out. Now that the cooking is done, the soap is going to have my undivided attention. For the next few minutes, I'm going to be working a balancing act. In hot process soap, most of the ingredients go in at the end as the soap is cooling down. As it cools, it's going to become more firm and it may start to dry out at the edges. Now this becomes more difficult to work with as the minutes pass, so I need to watch it carefully and keep moving it to help disperse the heat. Now this looks like I'm splitting it completely in half, but it's a little closer to a 2-to-1 ratio. I'm just eyeballing it at this point, so it's a bit of a guesstimate. In the smaller bowl, I'm going to add 1 ounce of white kaolin clay. This isn't heat sensitive, so we can go ahead and get some of our additives in while we're waiting for the temperature to drop in this soap. Now, as I'm mixing this in and incorporating the clay into the bowl, I'm actually watching the temperature drop in the other bowl. Right now, we're right around 140 degrees. This is still too hot. If we were to put the goat's milk in right now, it wouldn't burn, but I really want to work at a lower temperature. We're going to shoot for around 100 degrees. We're going to add 2 ounces of pumpkin puree. Now this is going to give us a nice golden color. It's the only colorant that we're using in this particular recipe. And 2 ounces, there's about 2 pounds of soap right in that bowl. We're going to stick to about a 1 ounce of puree to 1 pound of soap. And that's basically a typical ratio when you're using foods in any of your recipes. At this point, it all needs to be processed into soap. And if you leave chunks of puree in the bar, it'll end up bringing on the DOS, the dreaded orange spots, after just a few weeks. Remember, adding food products into your soap can shorten the shelf life of the product, so to get the best quality of soap, don't cut corners blending in the puree. Next, we're adding 2 teaspoons of pumpkin pie spice. This will give your soap that pumpkin pie look, and it adds to the fragrance in an amazing way. Now once I get this all mixed in together, I need to get another temperature reading on the soap to see where we're at. And right now at this point, I'm just really mixing to try to disperse the heat. That's really the goal at this point. The soap is starting to dry up, and again, like I said from the very beginning, we're in a really tight balancing act. It's getting thicker, it's drying up, I need to get it transferred soon, but we can't add in our goat's milk and our fragrance oil for that matter until we're below the acceptable flash point. So for the next few moments, I'm just going to keep dispersing the heat, and I'm going to go back and forth measuring the temperature as we go along. At this point, I'm right around the 120 mark, and I'm still going to shoot for 100 degrees. Now, anywhere now, I'm pretty much safe to start adding in my milk, but I really want to try to shoot for 100 degrees, and what I'm doing is I'm just watching the consistency as I'm trying to drop the temperature. If the soap starts to get too thick, I'm going to move along a little bit quicker, but I'm satisfied with the texture, and we're just going to keep letting it go so that we can get right where we want to be. Now with this method, you really could add any form of goat's milk. I've reduced the water content by 3 ounces at the very beginning of the recipe, and I'm going to add 3 ounces of condensed liquid milk. Now you could add powdered milk with even less water content if you wanted to, or you can even get away with adding a full 6 ounces of fresh milk right now. You could put 3 ounces in each bowl and it wouldn't be too much water. Now remember, most of the water has cooked off, and any water that you add now will have to evaporate in the cure. And you can't go overboard, so I wouldn't put any more than 6 ounces if you want fresh milk. But I've only added 3 ounces of condensed milk, 1.5 on each side, and the recipe for me will stay more balanced, so I prefer to do it this way. I'm going to blend this in, and finally we'll add in the fragrance oil, which is our very final additive, and once we have this completely incorporated, we'll be ready to transfer it into our mold. Now right now this is already smelling like a very heavy, delicious pumpkin pie, and the pumpkin pie spice fragrance oil will match this perfectly. It's worth mentioning this has 2.5% vanilla, so I'm actually only putting the fragrance oil into the pumpkin side, and I'm expecting it to darken a little bit. But the reason for that is because I want my white kaolin clay side, which, remember by the way, was not completely 1/2 of the recipe. It was much less than that. It was closer to 1/3 of the recipe. I want that to stay nice and white, and I don't want it to be affected by the vanillin content. So we're going to go ahead and put the fragrance oil in just the pumpkin side, and the aroma is absolutely incredible right now. Now finally, I'm going to layer this in an alternating color pattern, and you can see that I'm doing this very carefully. The soap is becoming thick right now, and I don't want any dry gaps on the sides of the bar, so I'm just going to arrange the layers so that they're completely filled in. Now once this is finished, there's nothing left to do but let this set aside to firm up for 24 hours before we cut it open. Now just as a note, most of the chemical heat reaction is finished. The soap is thoroughly gelled during the cook process, so there won't be any additional heat being generated from the inside of the mold as it's setting up. But even so, we'll still set this in a cool place and make sure it can breathe, and then we'll come back tomorrow. And after 24 hours, we can cut the bars open and you can see what the pattern looks like on the inside. And of course, with a lot of my hot process soaps, I like to layer them in a really organic, earthy look. So these sort of look the same for me, but you can be more creative with your patterns if you want to. And we have this absolutely beautiful texture. The aroma is so strong. This is one of the stronger soaps that I've made in a really long time, and it's just so pleasant. It does smell like food, so if you do like the pumpkin spice for the holidays, this one it will be very popular. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Pumpkin Spice, Goat's Milk, and Kaolin White Clay Hot Process Soap. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. And also, if you're ready to download hundreds of these recipes, come on over to thermalmermaid.com, where we have these all ready and waiting for you at your fingertips.